So in this video, we're going to take a look at both logical operators as well as switch statements, just to sort of finish off all the different decision structures that we have available to us. So of course, the logical operators are things like and, or, and not. So these operators are allowing us to combine together different conditions in order to check multiple conditions at the same time. So for an example, suppose that we wanted to check two different age conditions to see if an age was invalid. We want to check if the age is less than 0. And then we're also going to check to see if the age is greater than a particular number, maybe something like 120, which might be sort of the highest possible age at this current time, right? So what we could do is we could check both of those conditions at the same time by putting this in brackets. And then we want to check if both conditions if either of the conditions really are true, which would be an or statement. An or statement checks if at least one of these conditions is true. So I could put or, which is these two pipe characters. So that's what we use to represent an or in C. So I can check also if the age is greater than or equal to, say, 120. So with this statement here, if either of these conditions are true, so either one of them, this statement will execute. So that's what the or statement is doing, right? So we can go ahead and compile this to see. So when I go ahead and run this, if I enter in something greater than 120, the age will be invalid. If I input something less than 0, the age is invalid. So you see in either of those conditions, we get this code here executing. Now we have another sort of combination available to us, which is the and statement, which we represent using these two ampersands. This checks if both of the conditions are true, which in this case is impossible because we can't have a number less than 0 while also being greater than or equal to 120. But this is just an example, right? So we could have, some sort of operation to, check if two things are true at the same time. So ampersand checks if both conditions are true at the same time. The ors, which are the two pipe characters, these ones here, checks if at least one of the conditions is true. And then the last thing we have is the negation. The negation checks the opposite, essentially. So I could put a negation here, and it will say if this condition is not true. Right, that's the idea of this negation. So basically, it takes the result here and it reverses it. So if this result is true, it becomes false. If this result was false, it would become true. So that's the idea of a general negation. So these are the types of logical operators that we have available to us in C. Again, if you're familiar with any other programming language, you've likely looked at logical statements before. It's the same sort of principles that applies to every sort of language. I just wanted to show you the specific C syntax in this case. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about here was the idea of switch statements, which is another type of logical statement. And I'm going to give a different sort of example for this. For this example, I am going to try to convert a number into a day of the week. So we're going to say day of week, and we're going to store in, of course, that variable. And I'm going to create a prompt in here. I'm going to say printf enter a number for the day of the week. So that's what we're going to say. And what's going to happen is the user is going to enter in some number, and we're going to convert it into a day of the week. One way that we could do that is we could say, well, if the day of the week is equal to 1, then it would be Monday, right? And then else, if day of week equals 2, it would be Tuesday, and so on and so forth like that. But that creates a lot of code. It's a bit messy, and it's generally slower than if we used something like a switch statement. A switch statement instead says switch on day of week. And then what we're able to do is we're able to define different cases and different actions for that variable. So basically, we could say case, which is basically saying if the variable is equal to, and then we put a value. So if the variable is equal to 1, then we would print out the day of the week corresponding to 1. And of course, if you had like a variable, you could set the variable equal to the value, right? So that could be something that you could do. In this case, I'm just printing it out here just to make things, relatively simple. And then we have to put a break here. What the break does is it stops the code from executing at this point, because what you'll see is, the next case follows directly after this one. So case, if the thing is equal to 2, then it would be Tuesday, right? And then again, we have a break. So what the break is doing is it's preventing, so if the value is equal to 1, it would do this code, and then when it hits this break, it skips over the rest of the switch statement to the outside of the switch statement, which would come at this the brace bracket that follows. So this here. This allows us to prevent it from falling into this case as well, which would in turn execute the code for that case, right? So that's just the way that this would generally be set up. So this is how we would typically have a case statement, and I'll just show you, we'll fill in a few more of these. We could have 3, which would be our value for, Wednesday, and then, so on and so forth like that. I won't fill in the rest because it's just like a little bit tedious. You get the idea of what the switch statement is really doing. One final thing that we can have is a default, and the default is in every other case. It's like the else statement of the switch. So this will happen in every other case. So we could say printf, in the case where we had every date in here, this could be like an invalid date, for instance. And that would be the idea of a switch statement. So again, it just matches the variable provided here to one of these cases. So if this variable was equal to 1, it would do this case here. If the variable was equal to 2, it would do this case here, and so on and so forth like that. It's just a quicker and a bit cleaner of a way of doing an if statement inside of C. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.